were searching for black animals, going into the Semi-Gambia current, then into the tropical latitudes. And they landed 1 day's journey from South America. They landed in a place where they saw 3 hills. And he said those 3 hills reminded him of the Trinity, so he called it Trinidad. Very religious man. The next day, the ships landed in South America. Columbus did not come off the ship. The great navigator, so eager to explore, would not come off the ship because he's terrified to give the Portuguese away. Because I found the letter he wrote to his son Diego Columbus in 1505, in which Amerigo Vespucci is about to appear before the Spanish court, and he says, tell him to do this and to say this and to say that and to do this and to do that, because the man would do anything for me. It was his brother, Genoese brother, tricking both the Spanish and the Portuguese. And he said, certain monies are being paid to me, but I cannot detail them here. I'll detail them yonder. What money is he talking about? Not Spanish money for the prospective discoveries in America. It's the Portuguese money for keeping the Spanish away from the south. That's why Columbus pretended he had an arthritic fit, because he did not want to go into the south. That is why he was arrested. How many of us are aware of that? On his 4th voyage, he was arrested by Bobadilla, he and his brother Bartholomew, and sent back like a black in the hold of the ship to be tried in Spain. So all this Columbus period is built upon a fraud. Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian explorer, took a papyrus reed boat, which the Egyptians had used and the Ethiopians had used on their inland lakes and elsewhere. And he showed that the curves of this boat showed that it could cross the ocean. It wasn't just for inland shipping, and it was used 800 years before Christ. And he said it can cross the Atlantic. And scientists scoffed at him. Scientists took the papyrus reed and they said, if you put it in a tank, it will sink. And they put it in the tank and it sank. And Heyerdahl said, if I took a piece of the Queen Mary, which is made of iron, and put it in a tank, it would also sink. So, rising above the idiocies of the scientists, he built the papyrus reed boat with the help of Abdullah de Jibrin and the Baduma people on Lake Chad in 1969, and they sailed across the Atlantic successfully. They only got in trouble off Barbados because the Africans had cut a rope which was attached to the bow and the deck. And they cut that rope thinking it merely had to do with curvature and of the bow. In fact, it was a flotation device. That was the only mistake they made. When the Aymara Indians, without the help of African experience, rebuilt the identical boat, because on Lake Titicaca in South America, the identical boat was being used that was used by the Egyptians. They crossed the Atlantic in the Ra-2. And the strange thing about the Ra-1 is that, as I have said, it did not steer to America, it came by itself. The rudders broke on the first day, they could not steer. The currents took the thing from Africa and landed it in America. And Heyerdahl is not the only one. There have been 120 experiments with small boats across the Atlantic. And it has been shown that the small boat can arrive earlier than Columbus or Vespucci. And a man who showed that, you have experiments by Alain Bombard and Hans Lindemann. Bombard set out in a dugout, which no African would be mad enough to use on the Atlantic. He set out in a dugout without a crew, without a sail, and crossed the Atlantic safely from Africa to America in less time than either Columbus or Vespucci. And talking about the boats of Columbus and Vespucci, the sails on those boats were Arab Latin sails, which Arabs and Africans had used on the Indian Ocean. They were not European sails. The compass was not invented in Europe. The astrolabe was not invented in Europe. It is true that after the massive and continuous migrations of people to the Americas, that you had an improvement in hulls, an improvement in ships, which went far beyond other conquered peoples. But at that time, those boats were not superior. So to think that man had to sit down and wait for centuries until the stumble of Columbus landed in India and called Cuba the continent and South America an island, this has nothing to do with the truth of the past. But as I come to a close, I want you to bear this in mind. The history of the world is not written. The history of Europe, perhaps. There remains a great deal to be done. There's a whole world out there. Every time I go back into Mexico, extraordinary things are found. They found the pyramid of Comalcalco with bricks, with various writings, both scripts thereon, which has recently been found. A whole new set of things are emerging. This is not a finished chapter. This is no closed chapter. This last chapter has been written with a certain eye, an eye which has been blind to the genius of the African. Therefore, it is only by opening another eye, by having a different kind of illumination, a different kind of vision, that the history of the Americas and the history of Africa can be truly written. Thank you.